It ended with a blade, but like so many moments in history, the real story begins long before the final step forward. April 30th, 1513. The air is tense. It's heavy in a way that suggests something inevitable rather than sudden. A man walks toward his own execution, not as a criminal in the traditional sense, but as something far more unsettling to those in power. His name is Edmund de la Pole, and what makes his story so haunting is that he's not dying for what he did that morning or even that year. This man is dying for who he was born to be. To understand why Edmund de la Pole had to die, you have to understand a word that sounds almost harmless, but in the world of monarchies, it carries an enormous weight. The word is pretender. It does not mean someone who is faking a claim or playing dress up. A pretender to the throne is someone who has a legitimate or at least believable claim to the throne and is recognized by enough people to make rulers nervous. And Edmund was not just any pretender. He was deeply connected to the Yorkist royal line. He was nephew to kings like Edward IV and Richard III. And he was cousin to princes whose mysterious disappearance still linger in the public imagination even today. In a kingdom that had only recently clawed its way out of civil war, that kind of lineage was not just impressive, it was dangerous. England in the late 1500s was still recovering from the War of the Roses. It was a brutal conflict between two rival branches of the royal family. The Yorkists and the Lancastrians had fought for decades, while Henry VII secured the throne and founded the Tudor dynasty. The scars of the conflict had not yet faded. The Tudor claim itself was not entirely secure, and Henry knew it. He ruled not just through authority, but through caution. Every surviving Yorkist relative was a potential spark that could ignite rebellion anew. Edmund de la Pole was not just a man. He was a reminder that the story of who should rule England had not fully ended yet. At first, Edmund did what many in his position did. He played along. He swore loyalty to Henry VII. He served him. He fought in his campaigns. He appeared to accept the new order. On the surface, it looked like stability had been restored. But beneath that surface, the past was not so easily buried. Edmund's older brother had already attempted to reclaim the throne and paid for it dearly with his life. When that brother died, Edmund inherited not just the titles and the land, but suspicion. He became the most prominent Yorkist claimant, whether he actively pursued it or not. And once that label attached itself to him, it became almost impossible to shake. What makes this story so compelling is that Edmund did not launch some grand dramatic rebellion that sealed his fate. Instead, his life became a slow drift toward the danger. He left England more than once and sometimes without permission, sometimes seeking support from foreign rulers who had their own reasons to meddle in English affairs. He allowed himself to be called the White Rose, which was a symbol tied to the Yorkist cause. Whether he fully intended to claim the throne or simply could not escape the role that others placed upon him, the effect was the same. To the Tudor crown, he was a problem that could not be ignored. And then came the twist that no one would expect in a history filled with tension and political maneuvering. Edmund was not captured in battle. He was not dragged down after a failed uprising. He was handed over through diplomacy. A foreign ruler, caught in an unexpected situation and needing to secure his own position, turned Edmund over to Henry VII as part of a negotiation. And just like that, years of evasion ended not with a clash of swords, but with a handshake. It is almost anticlimactic on the surface, but in many ways it makes the story even more chilling. His fate was decided not in the chaos of war, but in the quiet calculations of personal politics. Once in English custody, Edmund was placed in the Tower of London. And here's where things take on a slower, more deliberate tone. Henry VII did not execute him, not immediately at least. Instead, he kept him alive. He kept him contained. He was still a living threat that was carefully managed rather than eliminated. This decision has puzzled a lot of historians over the years. Perhaps Henry believed that keeping Edmund alive but imprisoned would avoid turning him into a martyr. Perhaps he simply wanted to maintain control over the situation without provoking a further unrest. Whatever the reason, Edmund remained in the tower for years. His life was paused, his future uncertain. Then Henry VII died, and everything changed. His son, the notorious Henry VIII, inherited the throne, along with all the unresolved tensions that came with it. And this is where the story takes on a darker, more personal edge. There are long-standing accounts that Henry VII instructed his son to execute Edmund after his death, essentially passing the burden on to the next generation. Whether this was a direct order or just a strong suggestion, the effect was the same. The younger Henry now had to decide whether to eliminate a man who had spent his years in quiet imprisonment. In 1513, the decision was finally made. Edmund de la Pole was led out and executed. There was no elaborate trial. There was no dramatic final rebellion to justify this act. It was a clean, calculated removal of a potential threat. His brother had aligned himself with foreign enemies in England, which gave the new king a convenient justification. But the truth runs deeper than that. Edmund's existence alone was enough. His bloodline, his connections, the simple fact that some people might look at him and see a rightful king made him too dangerous to keep him alive. And that's what makes the story linger. Edmund de la Pole never wore the crown. He never ruled. He never commanded armies in a final desperation looking for power. He never stood at the corner of a grand moment. He never was the center of a coronation, and yet he died because of a throne he never touched. In a world where legitimacy could be as fragile as perception, he represented a possibility that the Tudors could not afford to leave open. His life is a reminder that in history, sometimes the most dangerous thing a person can be is not a rebel, not a traitor, but simply a question mark. So here's something to think about for you. If you were in that position, born into a bloodline that made you a threat simply because you existed, would you try to claim what others believed was yours and try to be that royal? Or would you spend your life trying to prove that you were no danger at all? I believe that's what Edmund did for a long time, and he still ended up in this position. But if you enjoy stories like this, make sure you follow the Facebook page for more deep dives into history's most fascinating moments, and subscribe to the History Happens podcast so you never miss an episode.